Hi, everyone. My name is John Bristowe. I'm the Community Director for Octopus Deploy, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Octopus 101 for the APAC region. If this is your first time experiencing the Octopus 101, don't worry. You're in the right place. This is a place where you can find out everything you need to know about Octopus. If this is the first time you've seen Octopus, this is a great introductory webinar for that. And we'd like to welcome everyone. So let us know in the comments where you're joining from. This is a live webinar, and we are doing everything live here. So you'll see a lot of resources come through. Don't worry if you don't catch them all. We'll be able to show them later on in a recording, which we will be making available up on YouTube. If you want to find out more, you can go to our website, which is at octopus.com. And let me just hop out of, I am stuck in PowerPoint. Let me go. Okay, there we go. Let me share with you some resources here. So we have our YouTube channel, a recording of this. If you're watching it live here, don't worry, you'll be able to watch it again if you need to. But if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see we're live. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see a bunch of videos listed there. You can find out previous 101s. You can find our Deploy on Friday series and a bunch of other webinars that we've ran in the past. So great resource for you to check out. If you want, you can check out our website, which is at octopus.com, which I mentioned earlier. You can sign up for a free trial there as well. And we also have some other resources worth mentioning, including our upcoming webinars. So right now you're participating in this 101. We have ones for the EMEA region and for the Americas region. We also have a really exciting webinar coming up later this month on March 21st, which is our 2025.1 release party, where we have a bunch of folks from the R&D organization. We have PMs and engineers joining us to showcase the latest features in Octopus 2025.1. And this will be a really good webinar for you to get up to speed on the latest and greatest features in our latest release. In addition to that, you'll be able to ask your questions if you have any. Wrapping up, we also have a webinar coming up after KubeCon Europe, which will be in London. We'll be there, and so we'll be doing a recap of what we saw and what we experienced as part of that event. Final resource, obviously, we have our Agro Unpacked podcast that we do every 2 weeks, featuring Dan and Revital, so check that out as well. All right, so getting back to the content at hand. This is the Octopus 101 series. The point of this series, as I said before, is to expose you to Octopus and let you know everything that you need to know about Octopus, so that if you go and download a trial and check it out, you'll be able to do so right away, utilize it really effectively. So as I said, my name's John. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at this email address. Happy to answer any questions you have. All right, so what are we going to tackle in this webinar? We're going to talk about 4 key things. So I want to make sure that, I put this on the table to make sure that you understand why you're here and what you should get out of this webinar. So first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about what Octopus is. And more importantly than that, we're going to talk about how it works and why you should consider using it. So oftentimes we look at technology, the why and the what aren't often addressed. It's the how that's often talked about when it comes to technology, but the motivation, the why you should use something is not often addressed. We'll talk about that. In addition to that, we'll talk about some concepts or terms, some fundamentals that you'll need to know in order to understand Octopus. So when dealing with Octopus Deploy, when talking about Octopus Deploy, we talk about terms like projects, deployment processes, step templates, etc., runbooks. These and other terms we'll define here, and you'll be able to use these in future endeavors so that when you're reading the docs, when you're utilizing the tool, you'll be able to understand what we're talking about. We'll then show you a very hands-on demo, show you how to create a deployment process, and then we'll show you how to execute that deployment process via a CI process or server. CI stands for continuous integration. It's a process that developers use to build and test their code on a repeated basis. Typically, that's where life springs for a lot of deployments. It doesn't have to, of course, but it's the canonical sort of example that most developers and DevOps engineers know. So we'll utilize that using GitHub Actions as an example, but we integrate with a lot of different technologies, as you'll see in a second. So to lay the picture of the land, to kind of flesh out what Octopus is. Essentially, Octopus is a technology or tool that sits in between your engineers and their CI processes and their ultimate targets. So on the left-hand side, we have our developers. On the right-hand side, we have our targets. And in the middle, we have coding, and we have a bunch of things that happen there. We have our pipeline. We have a bunch of solutions that we may employ, GitHub Actions, TeamCity, etc. And then really the question mark of, how do we do deployments? That's ultimately what we're trying to position here as Octopus Deploy as the solution for that. Now, the reason for this is because oftentimes when utilizing a solution, it can be a challenge, especially around deployments. A lot of tools and technologies don't treat deployments as a first-class citizen. They actually leave it as an afterthought. And that can be really hard because, as you can see here, we have a bunch of different scripts that are used in a bunch of different ways. And the reason why that's relevant is because you see a lot of shadow DIY sort of continuous delivery that's done in organizations. If you use even a tool that's popular like GitHub Actions, for example, a lot of that stuff you have to write yourself. You have to define the deployment processes yourself. And so with Octopus Deploy, we try and make that a safe and sane sort of environment within which you can work. And of course, that extends out across your entire pipeline. So a very complicated diagram, but before Octopus Deploy, it might look something like this, where you have code in the top left corner residing in Git. That would be utilized by a bunch of CI processes and servers. And then a bunch of other stuff would happen. So CD was kind of this hope, if you will, through a bunch of custom scripts. Not to mention, you've got a whole smattering of different environments, dev, test, prod, and even more, combined with a bunch of different tools and environment variables, and it's just a mess. And so ultimately, this is part of the problem of what we're trying to address. And so if we take a look at a better environment or a better mixture that we might see in this scenario, we have Octopus Deploy taking care of all of those things. Everything from your environments to your configurations to your strategies. So what deployment strategy you want to use. All of this lives within one tool and can be utilized across a variety of different targets. And then, of course, looking at a practical example like GitHub, we have a number of integration points there. So don't exclude other solutions that are out there like Jenkins or TeamCity or BuildKite or other solutions like that. But this is one particular example of how we integrate with GitHub, for example. And so with GitHub, we have a bunch of GitHub actions that you can utilize to integrate with Octopus. We also have a GitHub app. We also have an extension for the GitHub Copilot capability found in VS Code and other tooling. And so you can integrate with all these CI processes in the way that makes you happy. And so that's the idea there. All right, enough talk. Let's get into a demo, my favorite part. All right, so for this, I'm going to jump into an environment here. This is an environment you can provision yourself. I'll just make this a little bit bigger so you can see. So an environment, or what you might see when typically provisioning an environment like this, is you might see something like this. This is the Octopus UI, and this is in particular the dashboard. The dashboard is a really important concept to understand. It's basically your single pane of glass or one-stop shop to see everything related to Octopus itself. So all your environments, your projects, everything you need to know about what state they're in, all of this can be found here. We also support dark mode, so just to give a little slight contrast there. So we support dark mode, and so you can see, you get a sense of my projects and what state they're in. So across the top here, you can see I have my environments. So I have environments that I can give a name to, like development, test, etc. And then along the left-hand side here, I have different projects. Now these are grouped into different project groups. And so project groups are a way of basically isolating projects from each other. And the reason why we do that is because oftentimes you have a lot of different types of projects within teams, or you might have different teams are owning different parts of an application. And so we provide a way to segment that there. On the left-hand side, you have a bunch of options available here, and we'll talk about each one of these throughout the demo, so not to worry. All right, so let's start things off. We'll jump back into a sort of primitive environment here. I've got a pretty basic sort of project structure, and that's intentional. It's sort of like a hello world sort of environment. Let's create a new project, and I'm just going to remove my head here so you guys can see the whole screen. So we have a really good first run experience here. So when you establish a new project, you'll give it a name. You'll also provide a bunch of settings. You don't have to define these right at the start. You can define them afterwards, but we ask you questions like, for example, where do you want to store all the settings related to this project? Do you want to store it in Octopus, or do you want to store it in Git? We actually have the ability of underpinning everything with Git. So I'm going to choose Octopus just for this example. We have a bunch of other settings as well that you can provision. I'm going to assume all the defaults here just to show you what this looks like from the start. I'll just go down here and click on Create Project. Now, when I create this project, I'm kicked into what's called the process editor. This is where I define a deployment process. A deployment process is the series of steps that you execute one after another to do a deployment. So steps are anything from, run a script, like this one here, to doing, execution of a Helm chart, for example. I can also do integration with AWS. I can deploy to Azure. I can do steps with Docker, with Kubernetes. I can even integrate with Terraform. I can run Terraform templates if I so wish. So these and other steps are available out of the box for me to use to combine together to form a deployment process, kind of like a workflow. It's a series of steps that execute. If there is a step that we don't support out of the box in Octopus, don't worry. We have over 570, I now believe, 566 steps available from the community that range in a wide variety of different step types. So if you're looking to integrate with Argo, or if you're looking to integrate with Datadog, or GitHub, or Jenkins, for example, these and other steps are supported through the community contributions that we have available. So lots and lots of steps for you to use. So for this, I'm just going to pick on this one here. This is run a script. This is basically our most popular step by far. A lot of people like to use this because it's basically like, let me take the wheel. I want to take control. So we'll go ahead and add that to our process. So inside our deployment process, you'll notice now when I click on that, I have this well area inside the UI. What I'm doing here is I'm defining a series of steps that are basically my workflow, my deployment process. And you'll notice in this detailed section here, I have a bunch of knobs and buttons that I can tweak. Don't worry, it looks a little bit overwhelming, but just be mindful of the fact that there are a lot of configuration options you can specify for steps. So you can specify things like, what conditions do I want to run this step, whether or not I want to retry or base this on a timeout. These and other conditions I can specify for each and every step that we define in Octopus. So we can ignore that section. What we care more about is this section here where we define aspects of the script execution itself. So first and foremost, I can define things like, where is the script that I want to run coming from? Is it going to be defined inline? Is it going to be part of a Git repository? Maybe I want to have it part of a package. So again, there's lots of terms here that you may not appreciate or understand. That's fine. A package to us is like a binary. It's like a zip archive. It can be a tarball, etc. A package is basically a file that you'll send to either to us, or we can pull down automatically from a remote feed. So packages can live in remote locations and we can pull them down. So for example, a NuGet package, for example, these and other sort of locations you can specify. Now, because I'm just doing this as a defined here, I'm gonna utilize an inline script step. Notice here that we have a bunch of languages built in out of the box, and I can just simply say write host, for example, and say hello world. This is a very simple example. There's a number of mechanisms I can use here. I can embed a bunch of variables if I so wish. And the reason why this is powerful is because, as you know, as you migrate from environment to environment, you deploy cross development, then to staging, then to test, and then production. These values can change. And so being able to provide these as environment variables through a tool like this turns out to be really nice. And we represent this utilizing this mechanism here. We have this notation here that allows you to do lookups, for example. But I'm not going to utilize that here because that's just more of a different topic altogether. I can just define a bunch of other settings as well, but that's pretty good for now. So we'll click on save. Now, one of the things I wanted to point here, I didn't specify all the options here, but I want to show you that one of the things we do is we do validation. So it's telling me here, hey, you forgot to specify where you want this step to run. So one of the things that we can do is when you define your targets, which we'll take a look at in a second, you can give it tags. So you don't have to know the explicit name of a target. You can just represent it via a tag. Like, if I have a specific cluster, or if I have a set of servers that I want to deploy to, and I give it a tag like staging, I can go ahead and define those accordingly. So if I need to specify that, for example, through validation, we will go ahead and validate that based on what type of step you have. And we have validation scripts for each one as well. So it's gone ahead and provided me, yes, all good to go on that. Now I can add other steps as well. So there's a bunch of options here that I can specify if I want, but you can see here I've defined this. Let's go ahead and now create a release. So release is basically creating a snapshot. It's not actually virtually deploying the bits to your servers. It's defining what's called a snapshot. And the reason why this is important is because snapshots are like a point in time. They're a state in which you have defined a deployment, and it allows you to incorporate as part of that all the packages, all the variables, everything that you need to know about that release so that it can be easily rolled back, which is automatically built into Octopus. In addition to that, you can also have it migrate. So it's a really important capability, this notion of defining snapshots. So we define the snapshot here. You can see I've defined my snapshot. I have a bunch of different environments that I could potentially target if I so wish. I don't have any packages, get resources, or variables defined here, but we'll take a look at other examples here. This is just a hello world example. And then once this is available, I can then simply go to deploy it. So when I define a deployment, this is where I actually go through the process of doing this deployment against a bunch of servers. Here I can specify scheduling options. So I can say I want to have this deployment go now or go later. I can also give it priority. So this is an early access feature we've just enabled, which allows you to give high priority deployment for certain types of things. You can designate it as well. You can also, if you so choose, check off certain steps that you don't want to run. So if I am just doing a deployment through the UI here and I don't want to execute this step, I can simply just check that and it will be excluded. If I had a bunch of other steps we'll take a look at, I could do the same thing as well. There's a bunch of other options I can specify as well, but let's just go ahead and click on deploy and then do the deployment. So when you do a deployment, you'll get a full audit trail of the deployment itself, including a detailed task log. And this is really important because this is often a requirement for a lot of organizations. They want to know who did the deployment, why they did the deployment, when it was executed, and what changes were impacted, etc. These and other characteristics or capabilities will be audited as part of the audit log, as part of the release itself. And you'll notice that this release is conducted against a worker pool that we have available. So we have a worker pool and a worker as part of this that we execute. And this is being done against just a sort of cloud target that we have available for you to utilize. So you can see it just ran successfully. It was a very simple example where we just executed a script step, and then we just executed this script step to output hello world to the console. So nothing magical about this, but it gives you a sense of how a deployment is run and what it should look like. Inside this dialog, we also track the history, all the changes that went into this, etc. We also incorporate build information. So if I want, I can actually integrate this with a series of change or PRs that have gone into the code repository, utilize those as part of my merge commits, and then utilize as a part is with build information, and then I can roll those up into a README file to get change logs, for example. I also have an option here of specifying a timeline, so as you see deployments occurring, you'll see them listed here as part of this. If we jump over to another example here, this is an example of utilizing other ones that have executed in the past. So if we take a look at this project here, this is what a more elaborate sort of deployment process might look like. So you can see we have a bunch of steps in a second here. Sorry, internet. Inside here, we have a bunch of steps that I can utilize. All right, so we have 3 steps here. Let's take a look at a different example. There might be a better example here. Space infrastructure. Let's take a look at this one. I think this one utilizes Terraform. Take a look at the deployment. Oh, that one does not have. That only uses runbooks. We'll talk about runbooks in a second here. Apologies for that. Let's take a look at the pet shop one. This one might be a little bit more elaborate. Yeah, it's a little bit more elaborate. So you can see we have 5 steps here. The first step is to notify some folks via Slack. Second step is to send an email. Third step here is to run a tool called Customize, which is utilized a lot with Kubernetes. And then to send a couple of Slack messages based on certain conditions, whether it succeeded or whether it failed. So this is an example of a deployment process that you could potentially have as part of an environment like this. So you can see here, these steps vary widely and allows you to define these things really, really well as part of a deployment process. So in summary, what you've seen is how we define a project, how we define a deployment process, how we get an audit log of that. There's a bunch of other stuff you need to know. I did mention earlier a capability we have called runbooks. If we take a look at an example here, very simple example here. Runbooks is a capability that allows you to define basically the equivalent of deployment processes, but in the context of executing ops. So if I wanted to, I could actually define a process here that is a runbook, and that would allow me to do things like server maintenance, database backups, etc., and then execute those as part of my deployments if I wanted to in concert. So runbooks is another capability we have available there. All right. So a lot to take in, lots of stuff in the demo. I'll just summarize kind of the things that you saw, and we'll go into some other demos as we go forward. So in there, you saw that we have a visual representation of your deployment process through a series of steps. Something that I didn't show off, but I'll just highlight here, is that you can actually have these steps based on conditions. So you can say, if step A succeeds or it fails, run step B or step C. You can also have child steps. So in a sense, you can have them fan out into different branches of execution. We integrate Markdown. That's really important, obviously, if you're working in a team and you want to share what these steps do. You want to articulate or document what your deployment process is doing. We have parallel step execution, of course. So this allows you to run multiple steps at the same time. And we also have environment labels. Environment labels are really, really powerful because they allow you to designate certain steps to certain environments. So you can define sort of like a all-encompassing deployment process, but then tweak it slightly so that only certain steps will run in certain environments. So I can say that this step in particular will only run in production, or this step will only run in development. And the characteristics of that are because, you have certain requirements for those cases. A good example of running only in production might be, hey, we're doing something pretty important. We're going to basically update our production environment, notify the DBAs or notify the key stakeholders that we're about to touch production. And then they have to come along and either approve it or something has to happen after the fact. Those are steps that we also support in Octopus, by the way. That's called a manual intervention. And that basically allows you to get a human to approve a deployment. And it will stop and break at that point, kind of like a break point. Will allow you to pause the execution of the deployment before someone approves it. So these are other characteristics you've seen in a deployment process, and this is really a lot of the power and essence of Octopus Deploy under the covers. So some other things that I want to mention here, and the reason this gets into the reasoning as to why you should use a tool like Octopus Deploy. So first and foremost, and probably the most important, is it gives you a reliable and risk-free deployments, and it gives you that with built-in rollback. This is really important for a lot of folks. This is something that a lot of folks don't have. It's kind of like the train only moves forward, only rolls forward in the direction that we're moving. And rollbacks are oftentimes can be a bit gnarly. This is something that we built into Octopus itself, so you can easily revert Octopus back to a previous version simply through a click of a button. And that gives you a lot of confidence. You know, there's a lot of talk about deploying on Friday, for example, and we have a show, kind of an homage to that sort of meme. Deploying on Friday shouldn't be an issue. You should be able to deploy any day of the week. You should be able to deploy on Saturday. You should deploy on Sunday confidently, so long as you have a tool that enables you to do that. So if you have a tool like Octopus Deploy that provides rollback capabilities, you can go ahead and do those deployments quickly and easily. The other thing that I highlighted was our rollback capability. So rollbacks are a really great way in which you can integrate your release management capabilities and your ops teams into your deployment process. So oftentimes you'll do things that are in concert with the deployment. Like, for example, I want to update the database, or I want to do a reboot of a website. I don't know. I mean, maybe you're not managing memory very well, but being able to coordinate and get the ops of DevOps integrated into your deployment pipeline turns out to be really powerful. So that's a really big win. If you're working with containers, we support this out of the box, whether it's inline YAML, integration with Helm, which is another tool you might use with Kubernetes. These are other capabilities we support out of the box. So if you're looking for a great tool that will allow you to do Kubernetes deployments along with other types of deployment types, this is a great tool for doing that. And then there's a feature here that we haven't highlighted in the demo, but I'll mention, and it's something that we see a lot of customers use, especially when they get more mature in their use of Octopus, is this feature called multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is really, really powerful because we are basically the only deployment tool that supports it. And this allows you to basically do a deployment across like thousands and thousands of different types of customers without having to basically duplicate your deployment process over and over again for each and every customer. You simply define a tenant type and then utilize that as part of a deployment process. And this is a hugely powerful capability for a lot of our customers. And it's actually a feature that a lot of customers are like, this is the one feature I love the most of Octopus is multi-tenancy because it gives them so much capability. And of course, I mentioned this in the demo, we audit everything. So you've got full governance, risk, and compliance checking along the way. We have built-in SSO, we have RBAC controls, our auditing capabilities and our security capabilities are top-notch. They're awesome. And if you find that you want to utilize something like a third-party logging tool like Sumo or Splunk, for example, these integrations exist and you can simply stream output to those. We also integrate with other tools as well. Two examples that I highlight here, but there are many others, and I'll show you some of them. Jira Service Management and ServiceNow, for example. So if you want to have ServiceNow, for example, act as the arbiter of when a release or when a deployment actually occurs through a change request, you can simply pair it up with ServiceNow, and Octopus Deploy will be beholden to ServiceNow. ServiceNow will tell Octopus when to do a deployment based on a change request being approved in ServiceNow. So pretty cool stuff. All right, let's jump back into a demo. Before I do that, I'm just going to quickly check the comments here to see if there are any questions. There are no questions. That's okay. Either this is crystal clear, which is awesome, or you guys don't have any questions. You're just blown away by these awesome demos. Either way, it's fine. So just be aware of the fact that this is live. So if you have a question, feel free to submit a comment. Happy to take a look at it. So one of the questions that comes up often with customers is, okay, I got it. Octopus is a tool for doing deployments. Great. How do I automate this stuff? So oftentimes I'm not going to be doing manual deployments by clicking a button. I want to automate this stuff. Well, the way you do that is you'll integrate Octopus with typically a CI process. So CI is typically the process that is starting off, that life springs from CR. It can be other things as well. There are other capabilities that allow you to do that in Octopus. But oftentimes you utilize a process like GitHub Actions, for example. And so out of the box, we support a variety of mechanisms for integrating with Octopus. So if you just go up to the GitHub Marketplace, which is at github.com/marketplace, search for Octopus, you can see We have a bunch of GitHub actions built out of the box that you can use. These actions allow you to do things like install our CLI or create a release or run a runbook or push a package, etc. You can do all those things. We also have an app itself. So this app here allows you to forego using the actions and just automate this very easily and without API keys, etc. We also have integration with GitHub Copilot as well. So integrating with GitHub is pretty easy and pretty seamless. Jumping over to a repo here just to show you what this looks like. So this is an example that we have called Octo Pet Shop, very reminiscent of the Java sample app. And as you know, if you're using GitHub, you'll use this hidden folder called .github/workflows. This is where GitHub actions live. And so here you can see there's all my YAML documents. And if we take a look at one of these, this is a .NET application, but it can be any type of application. So this is basically the YAML that defines my build, test, etc. And down here near the bottom, after you've done all your builds and tests, you'll notice these are where our actions are executing. So you can see here we have our action here, push package. What this does is it basically, we have a built-in package repository in Octopus. So jumping back to Octopus, you can see these listed here. If you jump back into Octopus itself, there's a bunch of ways in which you can integrate them. So our package repository, which is here, allows you to upload all kinds of file types that you can use in concert with the deployment process. So jar files, tar files, zip archives, NuGet packages, etc. When you push them here, you make them available as part of your deployment process. But that being said, you don't have to use our built-in package repository. You can define a series of external feeds to get your packages. And so out of the box, you can get any number of packages from any number of locations, whether it's Artifactory, GitHub's built-in repository factory, Azure Container Registry, etc., NuGet. These and other types of locations you can define, then use that in concert with the deployment deployment process, excuse me. So jumping back here, you can see we utilized the push package action inside of GitHub Actions. And so we're basically just uploading a package to Octopus and making it available as part of a deployment process. And then after that, we simply say call create release. And so create release will simply go about creating that release for us and then making it available as part of a deployment. So this is how we might integrate with a solution like GitHub Actions as integration with Octopus. We also integrate with, for example, Azure DevOps. So these are some of the custom steps that you can use in concert with Azure DevOps. I'm not using the XAML view here because it's a little bit prettier. So these are some of the steps that we have. Of course, this is the legacy way of utilizing pipelines, but inside your pipelines, you can utilize Octopus steps as well if you wish. So you can utilize our CLI, you can create releases, etc. We are the #1 integration listed on the JetBrains marketplace for TeamCity. So TeamCity integration is first class as well, and we are the number one plugin there. And of course, I didn't mention it here. I was going to mention like Jenkins, BuildKite. There's a bunch of other examples we have. If you've got a CI process or a build tool, chances are we built an integration with it. So you can certainly use it there and use it in concert with your deployment processes, which is great. So once that executes, it will actually execute the deployment process that I showed you earlier, and it will execute those in concert with other types of pipelines you have. Other things worth noting, you can define a bunch of other options as well. So you can manage your accounts, which are connections to things like Azure, for example. You can manage certificates, which is really important, especially if you want to do secure communication with external services or servers. You can persist Git credentials, GitHub connections, define all kinds of things as well. So there's lots and lots of options that you can specify as part of this. Now, getting back to what I was saying earlier, when looking at your projects as well, so taking a look at a project here, you can see that I have a bunch of processes defined. For example, I might also define things like runbooks. Another thing that I may want to do is define a set of variables. So variables are things that can change depending upon the environment upon which I'm running. And taking a look at a different example here, if I were to take a look at, say, some examples, this is an example of defining a bunch of variables. And this gives you a lot of power and flexibility in terms of defining your deployment pipelines and your deployment processes, because these are values that I can simply look up and utilize within the context of my deployment processes. For secure values or sensitive values, these are write-only values. We do provide a mechanism of pulling them out and utilizing them in the right context, but you don't have a means of actually reading these back. We also have other types of variable types as well, and these and other types of variables you can define very easily, either as part of a tenant or part of a project. So if I wanted to, I can define different values here for each one of my different environments. So these project variables here, I may have a project variable listed as this and have it with different values depending upon the scope or the environment that I have defined here. I can define other types of scopes as well. So these values can change based on those types of scopes that I have defined, which is really nice. It allows you to consistently have the same name, but have it be flexible in terms of its value underpinning it. So essentially, that's Octopus Deploy. That's essentially how we integrate it. There are a bunch of other things you need to know, but again, this is just a 101. There's other things I can show you. For example, I can show you our CLI, for example. So our CLI allows you to do a bunch of things with Octopus. You can trigger a bunch of commands against it if you so wish. And so we expose to you a bunch of commands that you can execute as part of the CLI. We have integrations with the CI products, as I mentioned earlier. These and other ones are available through the marketplaces that they each have. And of course, you can certainly sign up for a trial and check this out accordingly if you so wish. All right, just taking a look at the comments here to see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions listed, which is great or not great, depending upon how you look at it. That's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into the slides. All right, so there you go. This is like what you learned during the webinar. So we talked a little bit about how Octopus works and why you should possibly consider it for your deployment pipelines. We talked about a bunch of fundamentals as well. I threw a lot of terms at you. I know it's a lot, but once you get a sense of what these terms mean and how they map to your mental model of what you're actually going about when doing your deployments, they make a lot of sense. So you have projects, deployment processes, releases, etc. Packages. I mean, these are sort of generic terms to represent things like files, but you get the gist. We then showed you how to create a deployment process from scratch using that run a script step that I showed you earlier, and I showed you some other examples with things like Slack, integration with email. There are a ton of other steps as well. Remember that if you don't have a step built out of the box, there's 566 steps supported by the community. And then I showed you some examples of how you may trigger that utilizing GitHub Actions, either in a remote context, and there's lots of ways in which you can integrate them accordingly. If you want to find out more, you can check out our website, which is at octopus.com. We have our docs. We also have our YouTube channel, which is awesome to check out. Would highly recommend it. And again, you can sign up for a free trial today if you so wish. All right, so with that, I've given you basically everything you need to know to go forth and be awesome with Octopus. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll just wait here on the webinar for a few seconds here to see if anyone has any questions. So we have a question here that says, when scheduling runbooks, how do you pre-select variables? That depends on basically how you define them. So if we take a look at our runbooks here, for example, runbooks are very similar to, you'll define them in the same way as you would define a deployment process, for example. So if we take a look at run a script here, for example, every script source defined here. So you can pre-select variables inline here, defining definitively as part of this. These values will depend upon the scope in which you define them. So in the case of this, it will be defined as a project variable, and you'll give it a value here. So for example, foo. This is not the way you want to define them, by the way, because as you get more mature in your use of Octopus, you'll start to define other types. You can define its type, so you can give it a type for the variable itself. So you can define whether it's an account, whether it's a sensitive value. More often than not, you'll simply select text, for example, as its value, and you can give it a value here of whatever you want. But this is really where the value itself can change, is based on its scope. So the scope, as I mentioned before, will dictate when and where that variable will be a certain value, and I can add different values here for different types of scopes. So if I match here for staging versus, checked the wrong one. Sorry for that. Find my scope, requirements, production. There you go. So I can define this as part of this and then commit this. So when scheduling your runbooks, this is when executing your actual runbook itself. This is where you do a run, which runs are a little bit different than obviously a deployment process where you define a release. So runs themselves are actually the execution of itself. And this is where you can actually utilize a snap. We define it explicitly as a snapshot. So this is where we give it a name and we generate this name for you as part of a runbook integration. But it would really dictate upon how you define your scopes. So if you define this as like a scope for development, this is where it will actually utilize those as part of that execution. We do provide a preview mechanism for seeing what those things would look like, and we can actually take a look at the values for each one of those steps if we so wish. But this is where ultimately that you would actually check those values and define those scopes as part of that. All right. So let's wait here, see if there are any other questions. Don't see any listed. Oh, well, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. We run these every month. Feel free to check out our webinars page if you want to find out for the next one. This is at /webinars. We've got ones for the EMEA and for the Americas audience later today, and we will be doing these every month. Don't forget, we've got our release party coming up. That's on March 25th. Would love to see you there. Got a bunch of PMs and engineers joining us to talk about all the features that are shipped in 2025.1. And then we have our KubeCon Europe recap. We have some other ones as well, which we have not posted yet, but they are coming. And so we'll have a very full month ahead, as well as weeks ahead for webinars. So check those out at octopus.com/webinars. All right, no more questions. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. Again, my name's John. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Would love to hear from you. Until next time, from all of us here to you, happy deployments, everyone. Take care.